Welcome back, viewers, to another chapter review for Boku no Hero, chapter 218. Before we get diving into this, I am Dab, and of course I'm here with my co-host Kor. I want to make sure to go over some items that I discovered in both chapter 218 and one item that I missed in our last video in chapter 217 before we get into this chapter. The first part is what I would consider the juiciest part of this chapter, was the name of Chikaro Yatsubushi. Because in that name, the Yatsubushi, there is the kanji for the number 4. The SHI or she is the pronunciation for number 4. Very possible that we may have just gotten a huge hint to the 4th user of One for All. The other part I wanted to go over was in 217, there was a big item there in regards to juxtaposition in regards to the quirk between Deku and several other characters throughout that chapter that are very important. The first one was that his quirk, One for All, was compared to the opposite quirk, All for One. In that regard, they are very similar. Yes, they both seem to be gathering quirks, but at the same time, within a few panels later, we are introduced to Kirishima, of course talking to Tetsuo in regards to how their quirks are identical, but at the same time they're holding a monologue in regards to how they are so different in nature. That is an extremely important thing with those two immediately back to back, that we had two similar quirks and right off the bat they're discussing how they are different. And then right into that comparison between him and Todoroki, both having two quirks, one of them who is very unsure about his power because he has to deal with what he got from his father, so he is afraid to accept his own power because of that, and with Deku now, who is unsure or scared of his quirk. So yet another comparison there. The final one going into that was, of course, Deku and Eri being compared to each other with their accumulation style quirks. That is important because at the end of that, both of them have agreed to accept their power and to improve on it. That is all important there because that right there is clearly showing a trend that it is the man or woman who makes the quirk, not the quirk that makes the man or woman. So chapter 217 is truly the man that makes the quirk. Going straight now into our review for chapter 218, of course, we start off with a new arc. We jump right into December. Everyone's excited, of course, for the snow. They're running around, excited for the weather, and of course, they mention that, of course, that it is the last day of the remedial course for the hero licenses that, of course, Todoroki and Bakugo are attending. They, of course, once again are attending this with Gang Orca, who is hosting the Big Four, Bakugo, Todoroki, Kami, and Inasa. Side note there that I kind of want to point out is the panel included a 5th person in that. Looks like a hero that's going to be using a plant-style quirk. It was very intriguing to me that this person was included in that panel when it could have easily just been drawn for those 4. So I'm curious to see if that hero is going to play a part somewhere down the road, or if they have some value coming up in this arc. Because most of the time, if someone's in the peanut gallery, they don't take that much time to draw them out fully, or maybe, just including like an arm or something like that. But this was a full costume, a full sight, so we'll see if that plays out to more. The training, of course, or the course that they were taking, of course, seemed to be a combat and rescue. If you were looking around in that panel, you can see, of course, Gang Orca, his underlings, and of course, if you looked further back in the background, kind of blurred out, but you could see the outline of people in what looked to be a wrecked city, so very possible it was very much like the last test that they had taken when they had done the provisional license. And of course, Bakugo had been in a good mood going into this, because once again, we're seeing development right there. He's obviously gained some camaraderie with the group, which is always good, because they say that he's been in a good mood, but he's still foul, so he's kind of toned it down a little bit, and he's starting to develop that more with those people, the other students in Class A.
I think with that point, him finally figure out what Deku's quirk actually is and what it is and how he got it, it really calmed him down.
I definitely think he's humbled himself over the course from the provisional license, the duke out with Deku, the seeing the other classmates, working with the other classmates, especially with the course that he took with Todoroki and where they had to deal with the kindergartners. So we've seen a lot of change in him, and that's kind of come to a head now with him in Class A, and that they're seeing the change we're all seeing the change. So it's definitely for the best here. Of course, you had Kaminari make the comment that he was surprised that he got his license before them, and of course he kind of got teased for that because he's got skills too. They kind of messed it up, not necessarily with their skills, but kind of their behavior while during the test. But for the major part of this chapter, though, it mainly covers what comes next in this chapter, which was the Cork support commercial. It's a company that is producing gear for everyday use. So whether you have forearms, tentacles, sludge, whatever, that way you can wear clothes, you can live your life without having to have any problems. They're in the commercial. He's definitely promoting a lot of difference in Quarks, that no matter how different you are, you belong here. We've got stuff for you. We can suit your needs. And of course, also throws in the comparison to early on when a lot of different Quark users suffered from being different, and that basically the industry of clothing, apparel, the world that we've kind of built ourselves on for being the same didn't work anymore and came to a crashing end thanks to Quarks. And a lot of that quickly made people different and led to people being ostracized in society or shunned or looked down upon. And of course, we know from other times where they've spoken with All Might and All for One that the early days of that was not good. That a lot of them were shunned, whether you were a good person, if you just happened to look like you might be a monster, you were treated like a monster.
It's interesting that this arc coming up is going to show us the past. And that's the one thing that has been bugging me. They've said that All for One has controlled Japan behind the scenes. So I think we're gonna start to delve into that arc, which I'm looking forward to.
I definitely agree. We're going to get some good signs there as far as the earlier days. And then, of course, in the commercial, they also mentioned that they were going to be breaking into the hero support business, and that basically they're pointing to a very hopeful future for everybody, from just your common man to the heroes. And then we get to meet, of course, the president of this company outside of the commercial. His assistant tells him that it was perfect and conveyed the message. And he's quickly to joke with the president of the company about his hair and his receding hairline and his large forehead.
Didn't talk about his large nose though, which is surprising.
That actually, yeah, I noticed that he's kind of got that kind of that evil nose that you'd see on like the Riddler from Batman.
Right, it's like an old school nose, like a evil nose.
And then, of course, they both agree that the hero market is rough waters because they have no track record. It's a brand new industry that they've never been involved in. I'm wondering if this is going to lead to them offering gear to heroes and staging crimes to make it look like their gear is a lot better than it is, or does a lot more than it really does, to kind of get them up in the top. They state that with their track record as far as normal standardized citizens, that they've done great, so they can definitely pull this off. The assistant, of course, like I had said, had been making jokes in regards to the hairline and the forehead. Quickly realizes that he can literally say anything and get away with it. And I think the reason for that was the president was testing him, because he wants to bring him into the next part that we're going into, which is mentioning of the Cork Liberation Army, and it was to loosen him up so he could get his opinion on it. And of course, with that, he started off with a book that was written by the leader while he was in jail, and Marishita, the assistant, quickly states that the book was terrible, that the people themselves were terrible, that they caught citizens in the crossfire doing their things. Their slogan was "Give me liberty," and he said that was crummy, and of course that they were basically terrorists and criminals. But I have a separate theory on all of that that I won't go into too deeply here in the review video. But that, of course, did not go too well, because of course you quickly see the president start to get agitated, putting his hands on his head, looking down, and he quickly asks Marishita if he has any family, whether he's got immediate family, a loved one, basically anyone that's going to come looking for him, and of course starts to strangle him. And we see the president's face, kind of like a black watermark kind of painting. Kind of made me think of those paintings you have to look at when you're at a psychiatrist's office and they ask you, what do you see? And of course, he tells him it hurts, and then you just got the snap, and he drops his limp body, and he kills him. So I don't know if that whatever's on his face is part of his quirk, if it's a simple power-up quirk, if maybe it has something to do with his eyes, since it's around his eyes, or if when he uses his quirk, it kind of puts him in almost like a form of schizophrenia, where he develops another personality that comes out and activates his quirk. So he goes from that friendly, nice guy to the killer that he was there when he snapped the mouse assistant Merishita's neck.
Yeah, I didn't see him killing him. I mean, that was a shock. That's for sure.
The real shock for me was it looked like after he did it, he kind of cried. He definitely looked like he had tears going down his cheeks, like he really didn't want to do it. So I once again that kind of lends me to the idea that he might have multiple personalities going on, that he really could just be crazy.
Either that, or he really loves people with quirks and doesn't want them to get hurt. But or he was just hurt by what he said.
And then, of course, it goes into kind of a backstory of the Liberation Army. He begins to talk about Destro, or Chikara Yatsubushi, who he refers to Destro, the destroyer of the present. And then once again, like I said, he's got that she in his name, very possible, could be a former user. So he could have potentially have bucked heads with All for One. So I don't know if maybe these two groups have some back history, because of course once we get farther in this chapter, we'll go a little bit deeper into that. But Destro, the former leader of the Liberation Army, had been in prison and, of course, had committed suicide while he was in there. But he had, of course, had written books and released them before that had occurred. But the president mentions that he had children that was unknown to everyone else, so we don't know if these are like blood relatives, how many generations after the Liberation Army, or if they were merely people that he had adopted into his cause back in the day, and then of course had family and all that, and he saw them as his children, so he referred to them as his family.
Yeah, what's interesting is if you see the portrait of the previous leader of the Liberation Army and you take a look at the president, it looks like they had the same quirks. So I'm wondering if that was father and son.
Very possible, because you definitely saw that. We saw the other ones all gathered around, so we know there's at least that many of them. And we know their organization's probably bigger because they do own that company that was running that commercial. So I can only imagine that a lot of the company workers are also in on the Liberation Army as well. And they're, of course, the first goal that they set is to aim for taking out the League of Villains, and they don't want the government to interfere with, which is very surprising to me. So I don't know if they think the government might be on the side of the League of Villains, if they want to take claim for that for the company. That way they can promote their gear. And then of course they state that there is people all across the nation that want to be liberated and be able to use their quirks freely.
Yeah, I'm thinking they want to take over the Nomu program to strengthen their organization,
That could be very
or
possible.
their company also. So that's a possibility.
Well, with it, they could use the Nomu to possibly create more gear. He seems very much like the. I'd almost, since his name's Destro, I'd almost have to compare him to the villain from G.I. Joe in theory. And I know he was very much for creating weapons of destruction and also systems of defense, so that way he could make money on both sides. So I wouldn't be surprised if they want to make villains and sell hero gear to kind of boost their own sales and things like that, while all at the same time promoting freedom to do whatever you want with your quirk. And of course, after he mentions that there's people wanting to be liberated, we quickly see a thief using his quirk with a group of his own thugs. Looks like he has a seltzer quirk, so he's able to do, I'm assuming, shoot seltzer out that allows him to move quickly. And of course, immediately, Bakugo and Todoroki, who had just gotten the hero licenses, immediately see the situation and jump into fight. All Might, lets them know, hey man, you only just got it, 30 minutes, you might not be ready for something like this, take it down, assess the situation first. One takeaway from this that I can see coming into a problem later on was Bakugo telling All Might that, just because he can't fight doesn't mean they can't. and I can see that really hurting All Might in a way that breaks his heart, especially later on. With that, of course, they dive in. It's going good. They at least manage to knock out away three of the thugs, but the big villain, the leader of the group, seems to call them out for being heroes. So the next chapter, we can clearly see that it's going to be their real first fight as heroes. We'll see how they take on the villains and how it goes from there, or how they take him on and what comes of that.
Yeah, I really want to see the teamwork between the two because I know Bakugo has had issues with working with people in the past, but it seems like with a recent match against Class B, it looks like he's improving a lot. So let's see if he continues to improve with Todoroki.
Exactly, because if it turned out to be a failure, the very first thing you do as a hero is fail. That would not be good for your reputation as a hero, especially in that situation. So you know they're going to do everything they can to resolve the situation peacefully and fulfill it 100%. So on that note, though, Core, what would you have to say? Would you give this chapter for the review?
I would give it to 8 out of 10 because it was a good setup chapter for the beginning of the new arc, and it gives us a lot of detailed information on what to look forward to, and it gives hints. The fact that there's going to be another faction now is exciting, especially the talk of a liberation army. Especially how in our last series video we were talking about how we wonder why there's never been any ever mention of about armies in the past, because you would assume most of the world. I forgot the exact percentage. I would have to look back, but most of the world, yeah, most of the people in the world have quirks now. It's surprising to me. Direct next chapter to find out there's something called a liberation army was exciting me.
Exactly. I 100% agree with the 8 out of 10 on this chapter. It gave us a lot to work with, a lot to look forward to. It kind of made me think back to that chapter when Overhaul was kind of first introduced, going into that arc, and what came of that with that awesome fight with Overhaul. I can only imagine that once again we're gonna arrive at a really awesome fight that's out there. Definitely some serious development. We have a new faction. We've now been mentioned that there has definitely been, military quirk usage now before, whether it was just on a national level or an international level, to free them of the bonds of being restricted on their quirk usage. And I think that a lot of theories can be fed into what this new faction is going to spawn as they grow and the arc expands out further.
The fact that the previous arc we saw a lot about teamwork, and the fact that Bakugo was made a huge improvement in that, especially with classmates. So I think that theme is going to carry over. That they're really going to need to work together, Class A and Class B, to take down this new threat.
And that is our chapter review of 218 and some of our delicious little possible spoilers and information we had found out on 217. Once again, if you like what you heard, make sure to click down at the bottom of the like button and definitely subscribe.